In this video, we're going to create another form where we're going to be learning some other types of inputs. So far, we have covered the text input, the password input, and also the submit input. So now we're going to create another form where we're going to be exploring some other types of inputs. So this form is going to be a checkout form. So we're going to create a form where the user is going to be required to input their address, for example, postcode, city. Also, they will choose a shipping method and a payments method for the checkout. So we're going to start our form from scratch, okay, so that we can practice the syntax. And we're going to go ahead now and start our form. So the tag again for form is form, okay, and inside the tags we're going to have our different inputs. So first of all, we're going to need the user to input their address. So for that, we're going to have an input, okay, of type text, right? So we're going to give it a name, address, and also an ID to link it to the label of address. We can have a placeholder, okay, and let's have address there with capital A. All right, and also we're going to add a size to the box of 30 pixels, and also we can limit the maximum number of characters that the user is allowed to put there to 100, for example. So here is our address input. So now we're going to add a label to it, okay, exactly the same way you have done before. So we just need a label before the inputs, okay, using the label tags. Let's write some text inside the label tags. We're going to write address. And to link it to our input, we're going to use the for attributes, and we're going to use the ID we have used for address, which is this one. Okay. Okay, now we're going to add another input. It's going to be the postcode. So the syntax is going to be the same. We're going to have a label and an input. So I'm just going to copy paste what we have done so far for the address, and I'm just going to change everything to postcode. Placeholder with capital P though. Okay, so you would have noticed before that the inputs, they are inline elements. Okay, so we don't have a line break at the beginning of the inputs. So to add a line break, we can just use the br tag. Okay, and now you can see we've got a line break in there. And let me just change this to postcode. Okay, so now we've got the address and we've got the postcode. Now we're going to add another one. So let's have a line break first, and let's add the city. Okay, so it's going to be also a text input, and we're going to change everything to city. Capital C for the label, and name is city, ID is city, placeholder is city with capital C, and that's it. Okay, so we've got the address, postcode, and city. Okay, now we want the user to be able to choose their shipping method. Okay, we're going to have 3 shipping methods. Very similar to the Amazon checkout options. So we're going to have the free super saver shipping, the 2-day shipping, and the 1-day shipping. So to do that, we're going to create a drop-down menu for this. So first of all, let's have a line break. Okay. And now the drop-down menu has got a special syntax. We're going to use the select tag. Okay, so to create drop-down menus, we use the select tag. So inside the select tags, we're going to have what we call options. All right. So first, let's give our select a name. Let's call it shipping. Okay, and also let's give it an ID, shipping. All right. So the options, we're going to create them using the option tag. Pretty straightforward. Okay. So you're going to have 3 options, and each option is going to have a value. Okay. So first of all, we're going to write some text inside the option tags. So the first option is going to be free Super Saver shipping. Okay. So the text between the option tags is what the user can see. Okay. But we need to give our option a value attribute, which is going to be passed on to the PHP code. Okay, we're going to cover this later on in the PHP chapter. So, and this value, the user can't see. So that's how you refer to this option inside our code. And you can name it anything you want. Okay, and I'm just going to name it free, the same thing. So it's free Super Saver shipping. Okay. So when you submit the form, if you select this option, for example, okay, the select input is going to be passed on to the PHP code with a value of free Super Saver shipping, which corresponds to this one. Okay, so we're going to have another couple of options. I'm just going to copy paste this. So the second one is going to be 2-day shipping. I'm just going to change the value to that. 2-day shipping. Okay. And let's change the text as well. And the last one is going to be 1-day shipping. Okay. Here we go. So now you can see that we've got our drop down menu. Okay, and let's just refresh the page so that we can see it. Okay, so you can see that we've got 3 options there, and you can select any of them. Okay, using the menu. All right, so that's how the select element works, or the drop down menu works. Okay, now we're gonna add another input. So this time we want the user to choose their payment method. Okay, but before we do that, I'm just going to add a paragraph before the drop down menu. Okay, so we don't need the line break now for this because we're going to have a paragraph, and inside our paragraph we can write choose your shipping method. Okay. All right. Now let's add another paragraph. Okay, and this time it's going to be choose your payment method. Okay. All right. Okay, so this time we are going to create inputs using radio buttons. I'm going to explain later why we call this kind of input, or this type of input, a radio. Okay, but for now, let's create our different options. So the syntax is still input. Okay, and this time the type is radio. Okay, so we're going to give it a name, payments, for example. Okay, and each radio button is going to have a value. Oh, so again, this value is going to be what is passed on to the PHP code. So the value for the first one is going to be PayPal. Okay, and so regarding the text that the user is going to see, we're going to create that inside a label. Okay, so I'm going to put my inputs inside a label. So I'm just going to copy that, and then I'm going to create a label. All right. And inside the label, I'm going to paste my radio input. And just before the input and after the open tag, I'm going to write some text there that the user can see, and I'm going to write PayPal. All right. So this is a radio input, okay, that the user can select. Okay. So it's a bit similar to the drop-down menu, okay, because you can select only one option. So we're going to create a couple of other options that the user can select from. So I'm just going to copy paste the same code twice, okay. And the second one is going to be debit card, okay. And so the type is radio, name is payment. So just notice that the name of all the radio inputs are going to be the same, okay, and it's going to be payment. But the value is going to change from one to another, okay. And for this one, we're going to write debit card. And for the last one, we're going to have credit card. And the value is going to be credit card. Okay. All right. So now we've got different inputs. We've got the address. We've got the shipping method, payments method. Now let's add another input type. It's going to be to allow the user to add some comments. Okay. And this time we're going to use the text area input. So the syntax is pretty easy. So first of all, let's have line break. Okay, and let's use the text area tag to create a text area. Okay, so this is what we call a text area, and you can write some text in there. Okay. So we can add some attributes to our text area. So for example, we can choose the number of rows, and we can set that to 4 rows. We can also set the number of columns to 40, for example. Okay, and you can see the size is changing. Also, we can give it let's give it a name. Okay, and let's call it comments, and an ID as well. Okay, to link it to the label. Let's call it comments. Now we're going to create a label. So it's going to be just before the text area. Okay, and let's write some text inside the label, comments, and let's give it a 4 attributes and link it to the ID of our text area. All right. Okay, so now we've got our comments there. Let's create another one. So let's give the user, let's allow them to tell us whether they want to be signed up for our email updates. Okay, and also we're going to ask them if they want to save their payments details to make it easier for them if they want to pay another time. So this time we're going to use another type of inputs. Before we do that, let's add a line break. Okay, so now we're going to use checkboxes. Okay, so checkboxes, they are different from radio buttons because you can select as many as you want. Okay, although radio buttons, you can select only one button. And just before we go to the checkboxes, I'm just going to explain the etymology behind radio buttons. So if you ever come across the old radios, you would have noticed that these old radios, they had a set of buttons, and each button was for a specific radio station. And if you pushed one of the buttons, all the other buttons, they were pushed out. And you can see that it's the same thing for radio buttons, because once you select one button, all the other buttons are pushed out. All right. So that's how we use the radio name. Okay, so now let's go to checkboxes. So the first one is going to allow the user to tell us whether they want to be signed up for email updates. So the syntax is input, okay, with a type checkbox. All right. And we can place this inside the label, okay, so that we can show some text for the user. All right, and right after the open tag, we can write our text there. So I'm just going to write sign me up for email updates. All right. Let's have a line break and add another checkbox. I'm just going to copy paste the same code and then change the code. So this time we're gonna write securely save my payment details. Okay. All right. So we're gonna add some more attributes to the input. So this one is a. So you've got the type there, and let's add a name. Okay. Let's call this, for example, email updates. Okay. Let's add a name to this one as well. And this one, let's call it save payment, for example. And now you can see that the checkboxes, we can check them or uncheck them. Okay, so by default they are unchecked, but you can control that using the checked attribute. Okay, so if I add that to the first one, for example, and I said checked okay, so if you want the checkbox to be checked by default, then you just need to set check to checked. Okay. Now you will see that if you refresh the page, the first one is checked. Okay. And also you can set it to unchecked, but anyway, by default they are unchecked. So we can set them both to checked if you want to. Okay, and now if refresh the page, we can see that both of them are checked by default. Okay, and finally, to finish our form, we're gonna add a submit button. So again, the syntax is input and the type is submit. Okay, and by default, the text is going to be submit. Let me just add a line break before that. Okay, so by default, as we have seen earlier, the text inside the button is going to be submit, but you can change it by adding a value attribute, and you can set it to whatever you want. We can still keep it the same, submit. Okay, so we have covered different types of inputs, and we have finished now our checkout form. We're going to cover forms in detail when we go to the PHP chapter of this course, and we will see how forms work, how they are submitted, and so on. Okay.